I'm gonna take you back to September 27th, 1989. A boy vanishes in front of dozens of people. 1 second, he's just standing right there in the park, and then the next second, he's gone. But he reappears, and when he reappears, he says something that investigators can't explain. Something that 35 years later still makes no sense. What's going on, Midnight Mafia? Thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode. And just to let you know, if you're not subscribed but you keep seeing yourself coming back, hit that subscribe button. More importantly, hit the like button. It truly lets me know that you guys like what I'm doing. And let's see if we can hit 200. But this is a story that takes place in Russia, so don't be mad at me if I butcher all of these names. I'll do my best. But as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go.
Would make my day. If you subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Love y'all!
Okay, so it was a warm evening in Voronezh, Russia. About 6:30 p.m. The sun was starting to set, causing the long shadows across South Park, a popular green space in this industrial city of nearly 1 million people. 3 kids were there: Zhenya Bilinov, Vazya Sarin, and Yulia Shokolava, and all of them around 12 to 13 years old. They had just gotten out of school and decided to kick a soccer ball around before heading home to go to dinner. And the park was actually pretty busy. There were about 30 or 40 adults around that were just near the bus stop called Pudlin Street. And others were walking through, heading home after work. It was just a normal evening in a normal city. Until Vazya looked up. And he saw something in the sky. A pinkish glow at first. And he thought something was just, reflecting off the sunset, maybe a plane. But then the glow of this pinkness got brighter and brighter, and it started moving. So he nudged Zhenya and then pointed. So the 2 boys at this point just stopped playing ball completely and were just staring. And Yulia turned around to look too. And the pink light was now directly above the park. And it was getting closer. And then it changed. The pink faded into this deep blood red color. And the light wasn't just a light anymore. It was now a sphere. And it was massive, maybe 30 feet across, floating silently only about 40 feet above ground. And that's when the grass beneath it started moving, if you could imagine this. And it wasn't from wind, it was from this thing. Some kind of pressure or force that was pushing down on it. And that's when the adults at the bus stop noticed it now too. And people just stopped walking. Everybody just stood there, frozen, watching this red sphere hover above the park. But then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it shot straight up into the sky and vanished. The 3 kids kind of just looked at each other. Nobody said anything at that moment. And then Zhenya laughed nervously and said something like, "What the heck was that?" And then they went back to their soccer game. But 5 minutes passed by and the sphere came back. And this time it did not just hover. It descended slowly, deliberately, until it was maybe just 10 feet off the ground. Close enough that everybody could see it so clear now. And it wasn't smooth. It had a texture to it. And it was metallic. And there was this seam running around the middle like 2 halves that were pressed together. The kids dropped their soccer ball. And more people were gathering now. The entire bus stop crowd had moved even closer to it. Someone yelled for others to come look as well. And within a minute, there were probably about 50 people standing in a loose semicircle around this thing, just watching it. The sphere rotated slightly. The seam aligned with the ground. And then a hatch opened up at the bottom. And that's when something stepped out. And it was not something human. It was massive. Imagine at least 9 feet tall, maybe taller. It was humanoid in shape. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head, but it was wrong in every detail when you compare it to a human. The proportions were way off. The arms were way too long, and the head was too small for the body. And it was wearing some kind of silvery jumpsuit that seemed to, like, shimmer in the fading light. Bronze-colored boots, and on its chest was a disc, metallic, circular, and nobody could tell what it was for. But it's the eyes that made people literally stop breathing. So 3 of them arranged in a triangle on the small dome-like head, and they glowed. Not brightly, but enough that you could see them from about 50 feet away, a faint, eerie luminescence. And that's when the being stood there for a moment, completely still, as if he was just assessing the crowd. Then a second figure appeared in the hatch. It was smaller, blocky looking, moving with mechanical jerking motions like a robot. At least that's what everyone would call it later. And it looked something out of a science fiction movie. Short, maybe 4 feet tall, with a boxy frame and appendages that didn't quite move like human limbs. Plus, its head didn't turn when it moved. It just walked like it already knew where everything was. And the tall being now took a step forward. Its bronze boots made no sound when they hit the ground. And that's when one of the kids screamed. It was a boy. Not one of the 3 soccer players, but another kid who had been nearby, maybe 10 years old. The scream was pure terror, high-pitched, the kind of sound that makes everyone else's blood run cold. The tall being turned its head towards the sound. Its 3 eyes locked onto the boy, and the boy went silent. Not like he had stopped screaming, like he had been switched off. Like his mouth was still open, but no sound came out. His body went rigid. He couldn't move, couldn't blink, just stood there, frozen, staring at this thing. That's when people in the crowd started yelling now. Some of them were backing away, others were frozen like the boy, too terrified to move. The being stared at the boy for maybe about 5 seconds. It wasn't too long. And then it looked away, releasing him from whatever had just happened. The boy collapsed to his knees, gasping. Then the sphere began to rise. The being and the robot turned and climbed back inside through the hatch. The seam then sealed shut, and within seconds the sphere shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. The crowd just stood there in stunned silence. Some people were crying, and the 3 kids, Xenia, Vazia, and Yulia, were huddled together, not saying anything. Someone said they should call the police. Someone else said nobody would believe them. But then, I kid you not, 5 minutes later, the sphere came back again. And when it reappeared, it was in the exact same spot. Like it almost had marked that location somehow and returned to it with precision. The crowd had thinned a bit since then, in the 5 minutes. Some people had left, but most of them had stayed, either out of curiosity or because they were too terrified to move. The hatch then opened again. The tall being stepped out, accompanied by the smaller robot. This time, the being was holding something, a tube, about 20 inches long, and it was metallic looking. It looked almost like a weapon, though nobody could say for sure. The being scanned the crowd again. Its 3 eyes moved independently, each one focusing on different people, and then it pointed the tube at someone. And this someone was a 16-year-old boy standing near the back of the crowd. Nobody knows his name because he was never identified in any of the reports, but everyone who was there that day remembered what happened next. The being pointed the tube at the boy, and there was no sound, no flash of light, no visible beam, but the boy vanished. Not like he ran away, not like he fell or ducked behind something. He was just gone, erased from existence in an instant. Yes, this is a real story. And if you are listening up to this point, make sure to hit that like button, but let's continue. So at this point, people screamed, and several people started running for their lives. The adults at the bus stop scattered. Xenia, Vazia, and Yulia sprinted towards the edge of the park, not looking back. The being and the robot calmly turned and climbed back into the sphere. The hatch sealed and the sphere began to rise. And the instant it cleared the tree line and shot up into the sky, boom, the 16-year-old boy reappeared. He was standing in the exact same spot that he had been before. Same position, same expression on his face, almost as if no time had passed by for him at all. But for everyone watching, several minutes, about 5 of them, had now gone by. So the police were called, and they arrived about 20 minutes later, and by then most of the crowd had dispersed. The 3 kids, though, they were still there, sitting on a bench, too shaken up to leave or do anything else. A few adults stayed also to give some statements. Lieutenant Sergei Matveyev of the Voronezh District Police Station was the first officer on scene, and he interviewed the kids separately, took notes, drew sketches that was all based on their descriptions. And here's the one thing that made this case different from every other UFO story you have heard. The kids' accounts, even though they were all similar in different spots when giving the accounts, they all matched perfectly. Not just in broad strokes, but in details. The exact height of the being, the color of the boots, the 3 glowing eyes that it had, the tube, the robot, even the way the hatch opened and closed. Matveyev was a skeptic by nature. He'd been a cop for about 15 years now, and he'd heard plenty of wild stories. But something about the way these kids described what they had seen, the consistency, the fear in their voices, the way that they couldn't have coordinated their stories even if they'd wanted to, made him believe that something had actually happened. So he filed a report, he marked it as Unexplained Phenomenon, and he sent it up the chain. And then things got weird. The Soviet news agency TASS picked up the story. And this was in 1989, remember that. The Soviet Union was in the middle of Glasnost, a new policy of openness. And the government was relaxing its grip on information. And for reasons nobody fully understands, TASS decided to run with this story. So on October 9th, 1989, TASS published an article confirming that scientists had investigated the site and found evidence of a landing. Why isn't this taught in grade school? Why don't all of us know this? Not only that, they found ground traces, identifications that looked like landing gear, elevated radiation levels, plus 2 strange rocks that initial analysis suggested were not from Earth. So as you can imagine, I guess at the time, because I still don't remember it if I wouldn't have dug for this story, but I guess the story went global. The New York Times, I guess, covered it, the Washington Post, international news agencies. Within days, Voronezh, or Voronezh, however you say it, was flooded with reporters, UFO researchers, and curiosity seekers. And these 3 kids were interviewed over and over again. They were asked to draw what they had seen. Xenia drew the sphere, Vazia drew the tall being, Yulia drew the robot, and all the drawings matched. And that's when investigators started asking about this 16-year-old boy, the one who had vanished. Finding him took weeks. He'd left the park immediately after reappearing and never came forward. But eventually, through witness descriptions, police did track him down. They brought him in for questioning, He was reluctant, of course, to talk at first, thinking everybody would think he was crazy, not to mention he was scared, he was embarrassed, but eventually he agreed to tell them what he now remembered. And what he told them didn't make an ounce of sense. He said he didn't remember vanishing at all. 1 second he was standing in the park, watching this thing point a tube at him. The next second he was back in the same spot, and everyone was screaming and running. To him, no time passed by. It felt instantaneous. But when investigators actually pressed him on it, asked if he remembered anything during those missing seconds, well, he hesitated. He said he had a feeling, not a memory exactly, more like an impression, a thought that kept repeating in his mind while he was, well, wherever he was. So they asked him what the thought was, and he paused. Then he said it felt like someone was turning pages in a book, except he was the book. He said it felt like somebody was searching, looking for something or someone. The investigators then asked if he knew what they were searching for. He said no, but then he added something that made the whole room go quiet. He said, quote,
"I don't think they found it."
And when they asked him what he meant by that, well, he couldn't explain. He just said that whatever they were looking for, whatever reason they had come to that park that day, well, they left without finding it. And then he said one more thing. He said, quote,
"I think they'll come back."
So in the weeks following the incident, the site was examined by Soviet scientist Genrik Solinov, head of the Voronezh Geophysical Laboratory, led the investigation. Yes, I know I am butchering these names. But they found indentations in the ground, as I said. There were 4 of them, and they arranged in a pattern consistent with landing gear. Each indentation was deep, pressed into the earth with significant force. Plus, they found elevated levels of cesium-137, which is a radioactive isotope. And some scientists argued this was just residual contamination from Chernobyl, which at that point, remember, had only happened 3 years earlier. But here's the thing, the levels were higher than the surrounding areas. Plus, they found the 2 rocks, and initial tests suggested that they contained mineral compositions not commonly found in that region. And later analysis was only less conclusive. But now the physical evidence didn't matter as much as the witness testimony, because the witnesses, especially the children, never changed their stories. Years later, in the interviews, Xenia, Vaja, and Yulia would all say the same thing. They saw what they saw. A red sphere, a tall being with 3 red eyes, a robot, a boy who vanished and then reappeared. And when asked if they were scared, they all said yes. And one of them, Yulia, I think, said something in an interview years later that stuck with me when I read about this case. She said, "We're still afraid, even now." Here's the thing about the Voronezh incident that makes it different from most UFO stories. It wasn't in some remote desert. It wasn't on a dark country road with just 1 or 2 witnesses. It was in a city park in broad daylight with dozens of people watching in a city with 1 million people. And it wasn't reported by somebody trying to sell a book or go and get famous. No, it was reported by children who were terrified and did not want the attention. Plus, remember this, it wasn't covered by fringe tabloids at the time. It was covered and publicized by the Soviet State News Agency. But what haunts people who study this case isn't the physical evidence or the witness testimony. It's actually what the 16-year-old boy said. Because if he's right, if whatever those beings were looking for, well, they didn't find it, then the question now becomes, what were they looking for? And more importantly, are they still looking? This 16-year-old boy was never publicly identified, probably because he was a minor at the time. And as far as anyone knows, he never spoke about the incident again after that initial interview. which would mean he didn't want to make money out of it, or he didn't want the attention. And the three kids, Xenia, Vaja, and Yulia, grew up. They moved on with their lives. But in every interview they have given over the years, they have never wavered. Their story has never changed, even with a single detail, which is crazy if you think about it. Now, this site in South Park, if you want to visit it, is still there. I just realized it's called South Park. But it's become a minor tourist attraction because a lot of people don't know about it. But people do visit, they take photos, and they try to imagine what it must have been like to stand there on that September 27th, 1989 day to watch something impossible happen right above you. But the real story isn't about the sphere or the beans or the physical evidence. It's about what the boy felt during those missing moments. The sense of being searched for, examined, or evaluated, and then rejected. Whatever they came for, remember, he wasn't it. And that can only mean that somewhere, someone else is it. And when investigators asked him that final time if he thought that they would come back, well, he didn't hesitate. And he actually said, they never left. Thank you guys so much for watching this story. Now remember, last week's story from 5 days ago, the views are, we gotta get them way up. So let's go share this, like this. Midnight Mafia family, y'all know what to do. And if you're new here, become part of the Midnight Mafia family. How do you do that? Well, you can subscribe, you can join, you can just hit the like button because you're a good person. That's it. And one more thing, if you're not ready to let go of this feeling right now, this story right here, you really want to see it. And like I said, if you haven't caught up on last week's story, then watch this one right here. But I love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.